Hi. This lesson is Jesus enters Jerusalem and Palm Sunday. It's lesson 11 for ages K through 6 that will take place this weekend, March 25th, Confirmation Sunday. The 7th and 8th graders will actually have this lesson 28, Jesus enters Jerusalem. And that works out pretty well because that will actually be the same Sunday of Palm Sunday. So they will talk about it in worship and then in their Bible study hour as well. Now this lesson is wonderful. It's the story of Jesus entering Jerusalem and kicking off Holy Week. So the key points you see I have on there: Jesus is our conquering king. We'll talk about what that means, not necessarily how the rest of the world thinks a king would be, but it's much better than that actually. The other key point is we praise Jesus just as the people did 2,000 years ago. So we are celebrating Jesus in very much the same way that they celebrated him back then. A few of the storytelling items. 33 years passed between the occasions where Jesus is called a king. So you think about how the angels announced Jesus and how the Magi, the three wise men, worshipped him as king. And then all this time goes by, and then Palm Sunday comes, and finally he's praised as a king as well. So a lot of time passes in between there. Jesus does a lot of preaching and teaching, but this is really at the end of his life. He's going to die in 5 days essentially. He'll be up on the cross after this day. So Jesus made special plans to enter the city in order to make sure everyone was paying attention. Jesus wanted everyone to know and to be aware that he was here now. Now he really wants this to be a focal point, his death. And so he does this in a way that attracts a lot of attention. So one thing we might not realize is how riled up the whole city was by Jesus' presence by the time that he died. By Thursday, really, he'd really made a name for himself between this event on Palm Sunday and either Monday or Tuesday, probably Monday. He cleanses the temple, flips over the tables and scatters all the coins and the money changers and things like that. And he has a few very public confrontations with the Pharisees. He talks to a pretty big group of Greek men and women who had heard about his preaching and wanted to talk to him. So he's just doing tons of stuff. He's super busy during Holy Week, and it all starts with Palm Sunday. So let's see. Jesus rode in on a donkey in order to fulfill the prophecy of Zechariah 9:9. That's a really big thing to point out to the kids, that it wasn't just Jesus decided on a whim, I should go in on a donkey. That seems like a pretty good idea. No, this was foretold by the prophet Zechariah. So if you have them go to Zechariah 9:9, you see it's explicit. The Bible says you will recognize the Messiah when he enters the city on a donkey. And it took a while, but eventually the disciples figured this out, that I guess we should have realized this while it was taking place, that, okay, here's the Messiah that was promised for so long. But Jesus does this in order to fulfill prophecy. One of the pretty neat things is Jesus demonstrates his power as God by telling his disciples essentially, go into the city, go to exactly this place, tell this man exactly this thing, and he'll let you use a donkey. So it wasn't like Jesus had made preparations beforehand. It was basically he knew what was going to happen, and he just told the disciples, go ask the stranger for a donkey and he's going to let you use it. Tell him the master needs it. So that's a pretty great thing in and of itself. The fact that this is a donkey and not a big, white, powerful stallion or anything like that, Jesus shows his humility over and over again. If we can, again, tie it to his birth, I think he was born in a feeding box in a barn. He wasn't born in a palace. There was really nothing about his life that would suggest majesty or wonder other than his own miracles, but he lived very simply. And this final ride into Jerusalem really is in keeping with that he's humble the entire time. So even as he's allowing a little bit of a show for himself, there still is that big element of humility, that it's just a beast of burden, as they say. It's just a plain old donkey that he rides in on. It really didn't look like a royal procession. Kind of it did. The fact that there were people gathered around and they're shouting and praising and they're putting their clothes down for him, which is a sign of respect. They're waving the palm fronds, putting those in front of the donkey, putting their clothes in front of the donkey. Really is a sign to show that they understand this is a great man. But the people act as if they get it, that this is, a wonderful, powerful king who's just returned in victory. That's how they treat it, although it didn't look exactly like that. It appears that they were moved by faith to do this. It seems a lot of the people that were here had been following Jesus for a long time. They'd maybe followed him from the town of Bethany, and now as he entered Jerusalem, they were kind of moved to welcome him in this way. But they probably didn't understand the true nature of Jesus' kingdom. It's just like the disciples. They demonstrated at some points incredibly strong faith. You think about when Jesus asked the disciples what they think of him, and Peter says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. That confession is wonderful. That's the confession I'm going to build the church on, Peter." And then, 10 verses later, Jesus says, in order to become king, in order to fulfill my mission from God, I have to die. And Peter says, of course, "No, you're never going to die. That's foolish, Jesus," and actually rebukes him. So there's constantly some level of understanding on the people that are following Jesus. They get some part of it, but yet they just don't. The death part is they don't get it. Why would this king need to suffer and die? They see him over and over again as this guy who's going to free them from the Roman army. And so over and over again he has to tell them, "No, that's not why I'm here. I'm going to Jerusalem to give up my life." They sing Hosanna to the Son of David, which really means praise be to the Son of David, and really means save us. So they're shouting to Jesus, "Save us, Lord, save us, Lord." And one key, neat thing to point out to them is that we sing, a lot of the stuff that they say here, we sing in church regularly. That we use these words to show we understand Jesus is our King, and that during this week of Holy Week, and at the end of it, he fulfilled this mission and became King of all heaven and earth. So just to point to that fact, especially in our communion liturgy, right before we celebrate the Lord's Supper, we use a lot of the words that they say here. Teaching items. Jesus was aware that he had come to die. As when he enters these gates at the beginning of Palm Sunday, he knows this is the last time I'm going to enter them as true man, or not as true man, but in his humiliation. The fact that he went anyway, doesn't that demonstrate his love for us? That he knows the whole time that he's going to die. He knows that his entire ministry, that everything is pointing toward the hill of Jerusalem. Everything is going uphill to the cross. That's where his mission is ending. And yet, he goes anyway. Everything he's doing, he's driven to die for us. And that shows you too that he's not a helpless victim. That he allowed himself to be captured and killed. This wasn't, just, well, that's too bad that Jesus got caught. He was going to do so many great things for us. No, Jesus knew this is what he had to do, so he allowed himself to be captured and killed. Why Jesus is our King? Now, this is a big thing that people don't see him as a king. To the unbelieving world, Jesus looks like the opposite of a king. He looks like a fool who was killed for his efforts. And when they see that bloody man on the cross, they see failure. They see that man didn't accomplish his mission, when really, by faith, you and I know that the cross is a trophy. There's a reason why there's a cross sitting out front of our church. The very first thing you encounter when you pull into the parking lot is a giant sign of Jesus' death. And that's because we realize that on that cross, he defeated the power of sin, of death, of devil. That when he said, "It is finished," he meant his battle was over and that the power of sin, death, and devil had been broken. And after that, after he ascended into heaven, he still then was placed as the ruler of heaven and earth. So he still rules things for us today. That's such an important thing for us to remember. Even when things in this world feel like they're sort of spinning out of control, when things in politics or wars or disease is spreading or things like that, and we just wonder, why is this stuff happening? Why isn't God stepping in? Well, he still is in absolute control of what's going on. God has his plans for us, and it's nice to know that we just sort of hunker down and serve him, and he's going to take care of everything, because that's the promise that he's made. And finally, the joy of this day stands in sharp contrast to the woe of Good Friday. So Holy Week starts out with this really wonderful day, and you probably, for the disciples, they thought, wow, everybody's getting it. Everybody's starting to see what we see, that this is a pretty great man, a pretty great teacher who just might be the Messiah. And then you think, 5 days later, how many of these same people were standing in the courtyard, calling for Jesus' blood and saying, let his blood be on us and on our children. So this is one of the last great times before Jesus gives up his life. So a wonderful way to kick off Holy Week and to show the children that Jesus was our King then, is our King today, and will serve as King for all eternity. All right, blessings on your lesson.